First, let me start by just saying thank you all for coming out to an evening meeting with government officials who are not the county executive. So we really appreciate your interest in the work that's going on here. My name is David Sloan. I'm the Director of Policy Planning and Public Affairs, the division in the County Exec's Office. I'm joined by many people here, but to my right is the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Economic Development. Come on in. DCAO Angie Rogers, who you will be hearing most of tonight's content from, but we're all here. We really appreciate you all making it out today, and we're really excited to be able to come back out and do public meetings post-COVID or in the endemic phase of the pandemic. For all of us kind of working together as a county and community through COVID was one of the toughest but most fulfilling periods of work in our lives. But I know a lot of people lost folks and went through so much, and we weren't able to gather. So right now, we're really feeling thankful that we can do this again. I want to first acknowledge a lot of agency personnel and leadership who are in the room. If you are representing or directing an agency, could you please stand? Just kind of wave. Thank y'all for coming. So there are folks from the Department of the Environment, the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Redevelopment Authority, Economic Development Corporation, the Revenue Authority, Employer Prince Georgians, Parking and Planning, FSC First, Arts and Humanities, DBWNT, and PGPD. So there are a lot of folks who represent the government and are all working together on many different policy initiatives that our communities have asked for, but there are folks here today who will be here after the conversation is done for any follow-up questions. Tonight's conversation is an update and a briefing on the development of the Blue Line Corridor and other transit-oriented development locations across the county. And DCAO Rogers is going to give some good context here, but this is re-engagement of folks who are leading our community as we go into this next phase of the work. I'm missing something here. I want to also acknowledge Delegate Jazz Lewis, who you were here from, who is here today. Thank you. And I believe his colleagues are on the way. And when Councilwoman Oriata gets here, we want to acknowledge her too, who we're working closely with and appreciate her work in your community. All right. Oh.
Pat Fletcher, Director of Communications for Delegate Tiffany Austin. She would love to have been here, but she's under the weather. So I'm here.
Pat, thank you for coming. Okay. OCR, the Office of Community Relations, did a lot of the direct outreach to you, so I want to acknowledge and have come up for a second Director Yanisha Davis. Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, everyone. How you doing tonight? Thank you for coming out. Good to see you. I'm so happy that we're able to gather in person. And so for this evening, I know some of you have already asked if we could address some other concerns. We will have an opportunity, a small opportunity to do that. We do have note cards that are in your chair, so if you do have any concerns, please write them down, and then you'll see my team in the red shirts, where yes, Walter, Mr. Rogers, Nicole, and Jennifer has on the black as well, Jennifer, and then you have Courtney, and then you have Cherie. So quite a few of us here tonight. They'll be able to come to collect your cards, okay? And then we hopefully will be able to get to or address some of your concerns. And if they are not addressed tonight, we will make sure that we do that by developing a fact sheet. We will contact you, okay? We will get back with you. You have my word on that. So I always say with community meetings like this, it's okay to disagree. It's always amazing to agree. And what I would like is for us to be mindful that we should be respectful, right? And once we're able to get to that question and Q&A, your concerns will be addressed. And so we're going to do that in an orderly manner. Are we good with that? All right. So do I have your word? We're going to be good with that? Perfect. Thank you.
And Director Davis, let me just clarify too. So yes, the Q&A tonight, we're going to try and keep it focused to the content that we are here to talk about, right? But because you all lead communities and you need to connect with government leadership on different issues, if you have a pressing concern about something else, write it on that note card and then submit it so that we can get an answer out to you if we can't get to it tonight. Okay? All right. The county executive, she wouldn't want me to start the conversation without actually being clear about how thankful she is to everyone here who is leading the community in some way. We're actually able to talk about the progress tonight for this work, which everyone in the community wanted to see happening at lightning speed. And we're able to report out some positive progress because as a county, we have actually been strong coming out of COVID because of your work, being involved and communicating with community members and getting information out. When this is done, you're all going to get copies of this presentation that you should send to whatever listservs you have. And then on the agenda that you should have picked up when you came in, there is the URL that you can go to see this information online on our website, and that's mypgc.us/TOD. But it's on the agenda. If you don't have an agenda, we can make sure you get one before you leave. So that is all the housekeeping, so we can get into this and have a productive conversation. I want to introduce Deputy Chief Administrative Officer Angie Rogers, or DCAO Rogers. And you might ask yourself, what does a DCA do? Well, in our county government, there is the Chief Administrative Officer, and she has 5 individuals who help her govern the more than 40 plus agencies in the government. They are all each assigned a cluster of government agencies, and it's their job to make sure that policy implementation is coordinated and that agencies work as a team together or individually. DCAO Rogers is many people's favorite DCAO, especially mine. And we really appreciate the work that she has done with her team, and both her deputies are here trying to help us get through COVID on strong economic footing. I want to welcome Councilmember Oriata, who just came in. Thank you, ma'am, for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. And with that, DCAO Rogers, I will turn it over to you.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. Sounds good. I am really excited to be here this evening to talk to you about the county's economic development platform, our anchor initiative for that platform, the Blue Line Corridor, but also some of the other work we are doing around transit-oriented development. So as David said, I oversee the cluster within the government, that everything that touches economic development. But as I like to say often, I am responsible for turning all 498 square miles of our county into meaningful economic development. That is urban, that is suburban, and that is rural. You will hear us talk a lot tonight about transit-oriented development, which is development mainly targeted for inside the Beltway and near transit. And you'll hear us talk about this because we really believe it is our best opportunity to bring more jobs to the county, to bring more housing, and particularly affordable housing and multifamily housing, which is a housing type we've been missing in Prince George's County, and also our best opportunity to bring the types of amenities that county residents have been wanting to see. Good evening. We've been joined by Senator Benson. So excited for everyone to join us this evening. One of the first things I want to say to you all just about particularly our Blue Line Corridor initiative is, we looked back at probably 15 different plans and studies going back to 2010. And saw that residents were really telling us something consistent about what they wanted to see along this corridor and for development in the county in general. And so that's why David calls this a re-engagement, because there have been lots of conversations going on for years about what folks wanted to see in this area. What we did with this Blue Line Corridor initiative was to really take all of that work going back to 2010, and synthesize it into a consistent vision that we could use to go get funding, because we thought about what the government's role should be in terms of trying to push these plans along so that they're not just plans that continue to sit on the shelf. We thought about how do we send signals to the private market for what they should be doing with their opportunities and the land that they have in this area. So this is a re-engagement because the conversation, you all started the conversation years ago, and we are now trying to catch up and move this to a point where it can really be implemented. We started out in the spring, I want to say, of 2020. I joined the government right before the pandemic started. So yesterday, February 14th, was actually my 3-year anniversary. And so we've been working overtime. We've been on roller skates. We started out that spring with a public land study where we looked at probably over 400 parcels of land owned by the county, by our quasi-public partners across the entire county, to really start to see where was there an opportunity for us to push the next big economic development vision for the county, the next big destination for the county, and our place where we could meet all of our goals. We could meet our goals for bringing more jobs, bringing more amenities, bringing affordable housing, bringing more fresh food retail to the county. And the Blue Line Corridor stood out to us, particularly for the amount of the number of parcels that were owned by us, the county, and that were owned by our quasi-public partners. Because when we own something, then we get to go in and we get to be the catalyst for what happens. And so I'm going to go a little bit into sort of how we got to that vision and how we arrived at this economic development platform, which has a lot of very ambitious goals, but why shouldn't we be ambitious on behalf of county residents? But before I do that, I want to maybe give Delegate Lewis a chance to talk to you all, because he really has been our partner in this visioning and our partner in pushing particularly investments in Annapolis from the beginning. So Delegate Lewis.
Thank you so much, Angie. Can we give Angie a round of applause? A little bit more than that. This woman works so hard for our county. I absolutely love her. Sometimes I know I get on her nerves, but it's because we both love this county so much. And thank you all for coming here. To steal a phrase from our center, you saw it not robbery to spend some time this evening with us fellowshipping, talking about the importance of the future here along the Blue Line Corridor. So I'm going to start my little bit here in 2019. Okay, we had a new speaker came in, new Senate president came in, and at that time there was a conversation about how we would fund a stadium in fact, in Baltimore. Okay, that's for Camden Yards and for M&T Stadium. And at the time I served as chair of the Democratic caucus. I now serve as the House Majority Whip. So I brought up the question, what about our side of town? Okay, and at that point, the conversation really got wrapped up on the ownership of the team and how we don't really, I'm not going to say we, I don't know you guys' position on the matter, but how some people aren't fans of the owners of the team. But for those of us who lived here for some time, we know that there was promises made to those who live in the shadow of the stadium on how we could have this type of transformative lived experience along Central Avenue, particularly in that community right in the shadow, and how we still deserve that. And working in close proximity with our county executive, those of us in Annapolis, Senator Benson, the other delegates, Senator Melanie Griffith, who is here, Delegate Ben Barnes, who chairs the Appropriations Committee, who's from Prince George's County. We all went to bat together to make sure we got equitable spending, not for a stadium per se, but for the community that lived along there. And that was based off the vision that our county executive and Angie put together to say what we would use this money for. Okay, it would be a catalyst that would attract more dollars along the corridor, which could be quite transformative. And she's going to go through it. But what you're going to see is the type of environment where, of course, you have shops and eateries that you want to see. But it's a place where our seniors can age in place. It's a place that's safe. It's a place that is affordable, which is, I think, reflected why so many county leaders and county agencies are here. And I thank you guys for your service to our county. I also want to highlight a number of our municipalities that are here, and I'll wrap it up. I thank so much seeing Seat Pleasant in the house. I see our mayor and council members here, a number of the residents. I also see the leadership, mayor and council for the town of Capitol Heights in the house. And I appreciate you guys' engagement with the county to make sure that we leverage all the resources available to us at the state level, the county level, and the municipal level to really transform this community. Delegate Andrea Harrison, Delegate Tiffany Austin could not be here tonight, but the Senator Benson and I, we come as a team representing all of us. And I know though Chris Oriata is here as councilwoman for Just Council 7, she's representing the interests of all the council members who are also here. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Okay. I am going to dive in, and I'm going to tell you, you're going to see a lot of information. Presentation is going to be shared, and also we are going to be doing many of these conversations to start over the next few weeks. And then our commitment to you is that we're going to keep coming back and talking as this progresses. And I know at some point in a meeting in the future, Delegate Lewis is probably going to want to talk about sort of an effort that really hopefully will serve as a vehicle for continued engagement. Some of you are probably familiar with the Purple Line Corridor Coalition that has been so helpful for us as an engagement point for the development along the Purple Line. And so I know Delegate Lewis is thinking about something similar for the Blue Line that we can use as a vehicle to continue to come back as these plans progress. Okay. So as I said, we started working back in 2020 to set a new economic development platform for Prince George's County. County Executive Ulso Brooks announced that new platform in June 2021. And we were really looking for something that was more comprehensive. So typically when we think about economic development, lots of people think it's all about business development, jobs, growing the commercial tax base, and it is about those things. But the best economic development platforms these days are more comprehensive, and they consider not just how you grow, but how you protect the people who are there. So they include affordable housing. I say all the time, affordable housing is economic development. It is good economic development. It considers the amenities that people want and need in their communities. It considers how we do open space. So a good economic development platform really sets the groundwork for all of these things that you want to see in a healthy community. And that's what we sought to do with our new economic development platform. Next slide. So we started out sort of thinking about who we want to be. as a community. So we want to be where the region lives and works. So many of you have probably heard the county executives speak previously about Prince George's County, for many, many years having been just a bedroom community for DC and for the rest of the region. So, you would go and work somewhere else, but you laid your head in Prince George's County. And if you worked somewhere else, that also meant that you probably shopped somewhere else on the way home. Where you went out to dinner after work was probably somewhere else. And so we thought about wanting to set a goal to help Prince George's and to express that desire to be the place where people both live and work. We want to build a more sustainable economy. So that is really about building our commercial tax base. Part of the issue I think we discovered over time with being a bedroom community is that then everything that you need to do in that community then falls on the back of your residential tax base. And so we have the opposite, sort of dynamic from like a Montgomery County in terms of our dependence on our residential tax base versus our commercial tax base. And so we wanted goals that speak to building that more sustainable community that would allow us to grow a more robust commercial tax base and depend on that, which will really make Prince George's and our economy more sustainable over time. If we look back at the last few downturns and recessions that we've been through in this country, the DC metro region as a whole is typically more insulated than a lot of other places in the country. So sometimes the rest of the country will be going through a bit of a downturn and the DC Metro will be going strong. That hasn't been the case for Prince George's County. We are typically the last to rebound, and we rebound much more slowly than our neighbors. And so part of that is due to that dynamic of us relying, not having a robust commercial tax base in the way that our neighbors have. We want to grow the number of people who call the county home. So for those of you who pay attention to demographics, you probably know that Prince George's County is growing, whether we like it or not. It is growing. Setting a goal for this gives us an opportunity to really think about and direct where the county grows. So 498 square miles, it is not responsible, and all of our planning documents say it, that it's not responsible to allow that growth to happen any and everywhere. And we remind people of that because, where people live, then we have a responsibility to get them water and sewer and fire and police and, schools and all of these services. So setting a goal around population growth is an acknowledgement that Prince George's County is an attractive place to live and we are growing. Can we think more strategically about where and how we grow? We want to preserve diversity even as we grow. So that's our affordable housing goal, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Creating access and equity across all of our communities that you've probably heard County Executive also Brooks talk about the number of food deserts, or what we technically term low-income, low-access areas in the county. And so setting a goal that allows us to focus on that. And then finally, we want to become a destination. So when we think about, creating more identifiable places in the county that someone who doesn't live here, maybe have never been here, but if they look at a picture of it and they know that's Prince George's County, that's sort of what we mean by becoming a destination and creating places that have an identifiable sense of place. When I do these, I always say if I showed you a picture of brownstones in New York, you probably know it was New York without me telling you it's New York. If I showed you row houses in DC, you probably know it was DC without me telling you it's DC. That's what we mean by identifiable place. So we're the places in Prince George's that sell themselves without us having to be there sort of giving the whole spiel or giving the whole pitch. Next slide. So we set these goals. I said increasing the number of people who live and work in the county. And I'll say that you guys are going to get this presentation, but there's also a document with our full economic development platform that's up online that has all of these goals in detail. And there's a lot of detail associated with them, but they'll give you a sense as you flip through it of what we are really trying to accomplish and how we're trying to accomplish it. So increasing our commercial tax collections by $100 million. These are all 2030 goals. Increasing population, particularly inside the Beltway and near transit. Preserving housing affordability and diversifying the county's housing stock. So we set a goal to build 26,000 new units of housing by 2030, 75% of which would be affordable. And I'll just say a little bit more about our housing affordability goal because, you know, lots of people said to us as we were developing this goal, well, why would you develop an affordable housing goal? Prince George's County's got enough affordable housing already. And, you know, my response to that is that some of it you might have now, but we can see how different areas of the county are growing. Some of you probably can't see it, but there's a lot of investor activity going on along the Blue Line corridor already that is squeezing prices and starting to make it more unaffordable. The areas along the Purple Line are have some of the fastest growing rents in the region, not just for Prince George's County. And so if we wanted to think about an economic development platform that not only plans for the growth that we want to see, but plans for preserving spaces for families in a range of incomes. To be able to stay and have a place here in our county, then it's important for us to think about it up front. I use the example on a micro level because we just opened with the University of Maryland, right? Opened a new hospital. If we build a new hospital and the only people who can afford to live in the community where that hospital is are the doctors and the administrators, but the phlebotomist and the person who takes out the bio waste and, you know, the nurses, if they've got to come from, 50 miles away, then we've lost. That's an opportunity that we've lost. And so we are less competitive as a county if we do not make room for a range of incomes folks to live here. So affordable housing, increasing our healthy food retail square footage by 100,000 square feet, and again, increasing those areas in the county with identifiable character and a sense of place. So I'm going to talk to you, as I said, a bit about the Blue Line Corridor, which is our anchor initiative for the Economic Development Platform. And the Blue Line Corridor runs from Capitol Heights down at the Prince George's DC line, all the way out to Largo Town Center, or what we now know as downtown Largo, and including Central Avenue. Next slide. So the one thing I'll say to you about the Blue Line Corridor is that for us, it is meant to be a model. And a model for how we can do place-based economic development in the county better. It is not meant for us to only focus on the Blue Line. But, we look at, like a national harbor, right, and sort of what that's become. And National Harbor has been pivotal for the county. And our question was, how do we make that happen again somewhere else in the county? And not that particular, but that sort of mix of jobs, housing, amenities. and increasing our tax collections. How do we make that happen again somewhere else? And how do we do it better? How do we do it faster? How do we get our agencies to work together better to bring that outcome to fruition? And so for us, we look at the Blue Line Corridor as an opportunity to set a model for how we then pick that up, and then how do we do it, in the southern portion of the Green Line? Or how do we do it, in Suitland, or that's a bad example because that one's already going. But how do we take this and sort of do this better in other places? We branded the Blue Line Corridor for sports, entertainment, and culture for a couple of different reasons. One, it goes without saying that, at the bookend of this corridor is the Commander Stadium. And that was an opportunity to think about sort of what new could happen there on that site. We also have a county executive who is super focused on youth sports and set a goal for us to make Prince George's County the youth sports capital of the country, that's right. And so, that was an opportunity for us to think about sort of leveraging some of the things that were already here with the vision that we were setting for ourselves. We've got so many really great sports-related assets in the county already, and so this is an opportunity to think about how do we build things here that could be a catalyst, but also sort of leverage an identity that Prince George's is already attached to. Everybody, I'm assuming in here, has seen that documentary, Something in the Water, Basketball County. That's us, right? And so these are the things that we were thinking about as we thought about how to be a catalyst and how to leverage along the Blue Line Corridor. Next slide. So we, as I said, started visioning for this in 2020. And by the end of 2020, early 2021 was where we started to go, particularly to our partners at the state level, because, as I said, there had been plans on this going back to 2010, right? All we did was synthesize what those plans were and sort of put it into a succinct vision so that somebody else could see it and say, yes, I want to invest in that. So we started putting this before our delegation, other partners at the state level, and we've had a little bit of success to date. So over 2 General Assembly sessions, we've been able to bring back more than $466 million for investments along. Yeah, that deserves an applause. When I see that number, I have to tell you, and I've been doing economic development and affordable housing for a while. I'm not a spring chicken anymore, but to take something from concept to $466 million in less than 2 years, I'm like, whoa, Prince George's County, show out. So we started, it wasn't easy. That's right. So we started out that first General Assembly session really focusing on investments that would start to change the look and feel of the corridor. So infrastructure investments focused on pedestrian safety, particularly at the metro nodes. You're going to hear us talk as we continue this conversation a lot about complete streets, which is all about how you start to turn some of our car-centric thoroughfares into places that are multimodal and safe for pedestrians and bikers. And this is, I'll say something that I also say all the time. If we build a bunch of stuff along Central Avenue, along the Blue Line, and the only way that you can get to it is to get in your car, drive to it, find a place to park, go in, then we've missed the boat on what transit-oriented development is and the catalyst that it's meant to be. And so we started by focusing on these kinds of infrastructure investments and investments meant to increase and improve multimodality because that to us was, one, the right role for government, but also would start to create some of the value along the corridor that could tee up the private market to begin to do their own work along the Blue Line corridor. So we started that, but then we came back second session, Maryland General Assembly session 2022, and had this opportunity to go after this $400 million worth of bond capacity partnership with the Maryland Stadium Authority to build some of the vertical facilities that I'll admit when we were originally visioning in 2020, we thought, it might be a while before we get to build something vertical. We might have to wait for the market to materialize for us to build some of these things. So the partnership with the Maryland Stadium Authority and the $400 million in bond funding is an amazing opportunity, and it is an opportunity where we get to go in and be the catalyst and say we're going to seed these markets and create that value that then sets the stage for the private market to also come in and develop. Next slide. So I'm going to start to go through some of those vertical facilities that we have gotten funding to build. I will say that each of these are going to have their own engagement processes. So there's no need to tonight because they are each going to have their own engagement processes where we continue to come back and talk about these things and get ideas as they materialize. So the first thing on the list is an amphitheater. And we originally were looking at something that was a little bit smaller capacity, but this bump up in funding has really given us the ability to think through a venue that really operators from across the country were encouraging us to think about something that could compete, with a wolf trap. But then it would be something, like in an urban center, at a metro. So we've been looking at a venue that would be somewhere between 7,500 and 10,000 capacity. It would be a venue that could flex from smaller enclosed events, maybe 1,500 to 2,000 folks, up to the sort of mid-range, sort of partially covered, kind of a 3 to 5,000 person event, to your full-on outdoor event that would use up the entire capacity. Part of what's important to us about having that ability to flex between sort of small and closed to really large events is that we would get the opportunity to use this venue throughout the year. It would be an opportunity for the community, for us to do more community-focused events, particularly with the ability to do the smaller enclosed events. I'll say that we thought or have been thinking a lot also about the space around the amphitheater, the green space that would be around it, and having that be something that's available for the community to interact with as well. Next slide. These are just some of the precedents that we have been looking at really from around the country of amphitheaters. And, we will be excited at some time in the hopefully near future to show you exactly what we've been looking at for our amphitheater here in Prince George's County. Next slide. Market Hall. This is a venue that we envision co-locating with the amphitheater. We think that these two venues can work well together. So Union Market is obviously I think, sort of premier concept in this region. But, the one thing I'll say is that the amount of public funds that we are looking at putting into this market hall, we really hope will allow us particularly to reach more minority businesses, food-based businesses, arts-based businesses, to reach to draw them into this concept. I think the latest food hall that opened in the county was Le Fantôme up at Riverdale Park. If you haven't been, it's wonderful. Please go. But the buy-in, as I understand it, to Le Fantôme for vendors was starting at $25,000. That's a steep price, particularly for some of our small and minority businesses. So we hope, this is this market hall is our opportunity, particularly to sort of open that buy-in up to smaller minority businesses who are looking to incubate in our space. Next slide. And these are just some other examples, precedents that we've been looking at for market halls across the country. Next slide. Youth Sports Field House. So this is an exciting one, particularly. Remember, I said in the beginning we were looking to becoming the youth sports capital of the country. So we've got a lot of really impressive youth sports facilities. One of the things that we were missing was this concept where we want to bring an international competition grade field house to the county that would spend 2/3 of the year catering to national and international competitions. So when we think about the ability to sort of catalyze, right, because these things are meant to be catalysts as well, to catalyze hotels and restaurants. That means that we've got to be bringing folks in. I mean, it's if you live in the region, you're not going to come here. You're not going to come to the Blue Line corridor and spend a night in a hotel to have your kid compete. So this is a plug that we are trying to fit into our network of youth sports facilities, and specifically to help bring in some of that national and international youth sports traffic that would also feed our hotels and our restaurants and our other small businesses. They're about 10, so this would be an indoor facility. There are about 10 different sports that it would flex to. So without looking at my list, I'm probably going to forget something, but basketball, volleyball, indoor soccer, field hockey, futsal, MMA, gymnastics. I'm forgetting some. Pickleball. How could I forget pickleball? Because when I heard it, I was like, what is that? And is that a thing? And apparently, yes, it is a thing. So about 2/3 of the year catering to those national and international competitions, about 1/3 of the year catering to our local competitions. Next slide. These are just more information and precedents that we've been looking at for a youth sports field house. Next slide. Central Library and Cultural Center. This is also an exciting one. So when we were visioning for the Blue Line Corridor originally, we were visioning for a cultural center. And we wanted it to be the kind of thing, this kind of iconic design. Go back to my comments about placemaking. And establishing identifiable place, and people see pictures of something and they're like, oh, that's in Prince George's County. We were thinking about it from that perspective, that you would walk out of one of our metro stations and there would be this iconically designed cultural center. After we finished our visioning, libraries came to us and said, hey, we were thinking about doing a new library too, and there's lots of precedents for putting libraries and cultural centers together. Let's start to plan for this together. And who knew, a little while later, we would actually have money to build the thing. But here we are. Next slide. These are just some precedents, and I think the precedents sort of make the point that we want to make about this library and cultural center is, I say all the time, it's not your mama's library and cultural center. These places these days are hubs. Anywhere that for any reason that people are gathering, that is how and why you design them. And so we're really looking at our library and cultural center in that way, to be a hub in our Blue Line corridor, in our downtown, as a place for people to gather. Next slide. Civic Plaza at the Wayne K. Curry building. So I don't know how many of you have ever been to our Wayne K. Curry building over on McCormick Boulevard. It's a great building. It is surrounded by a sea of surface parking, which when you look at other downtowns where you're trying to achieve dense urban design, you don't see a lot of buildings that are surrounded by a sea of surface parking. And so part of what we said while we were visioning is, if we want to set a new vision for what the Blue Line corridor could and should look like, we need to start with ourselves. And so the idea is to turn a portion of our parking lot into a civic plaza that can also become a hub for engagement, for activity, as we start to do some of that complete streets work where we encourage people to sort of be out more walking and biking in the area, that there are things for them to engage with, and the Civic Plaza is one of them. Next slide. These are just some beautiful precedents that we've been looking at that others have done with their civic plazas. Next slide. So this is just a summary of the opportunities that are going to start to come this year as a result of this work. And it's everything from naming rights on some of these facilities, opportunities for our business community to bid on construction and design, concessions. We know that some of the facilities that we're building are going to need structured parking associated with them. So there also are going to be opportunities for our business community in this as well. Next slide. So I just want to run through a couple of slides to show you, at least at each of the station nodes, sort of what the vision, the high-level vision was that we set for the Blue Line corridor. Next slide. So this is the high-level vision that we set for downtown Largo. And the amazing thing about this is that there's a lot of that work that's already started. So the hospital is already there, and they're in the process of building the new cancer center. The Carillon development is headed into their kind of phase 1B, if you will, which will be their first multifamily building. They're almost done with the first office building, and they'll be headed into their multifamily phase next. We are continuing to build out our civic core, which is a little bit sort of northeast of that. So this is the amazing thing about Largo, is that a lot of that work had already started to happen. Next slide. Oh. So this is a view if you are looking on Grand Avenue toward the metro station. And we wanted to show this view really to provide the vision for the level of density and the style of development that we're looking to see in the downtown that creates this kind of engagement. And so, part of this is, I think there's one, you can see kind of the hospital in the background. I think there's one of the buildings on the left side that's already there, but all of this is also development opportunity that is still materializing, and some of it where we own the land, and so we get to sort of seed what happens. Next slide. I have not talked about the Central Avenue Connector Trail yet, but it is hugely important to the Blue Line Corridor plans. So for those of you who haven't heard about the Connector Trail, and hopefully you have been in community meetings where you've heard about it, it is set to run from the Prince George's DC line all the way out to Largo, and up to the stadium. It is a bicycle and pedestrian and scooter, I guess, trail. And what you see here is, part of, so going back to my comments about identifiable place, part of what we envision is that the piece of the connector trail that would run over the Beltway, that we would do this iconic bridge structure so that as folks are passing on the Beltway, they know that they are passing through Prince George's County. And so the connector trail is going to be really important for the Blue Line Corridor in connecting sort of one end of the corridor to the other, and being able to connect that one end to the other without you having to get into a car. But hopefully, our intention is to have some really beautiful, iconic pieces of it as well. Next slide. Morgan Boulevard. So this is right at the Morgan Boulevard Metro Station, and I'll say Morgan was probably the greatest impetus for us sort of looking at the Blue Line Corridor as, our next big destination, because there's 50 acres of basically brush and tree cover that sits south of the metro station. And we saw that as an incredible opportunity for us to go in and sort of put in the infrastructure that then creates developable paths for us and the private sector to come in and make something happen there. Next slide. So this is really where you get to see sort of what we envision once we do a complete streets transformation. So this would be the view at Central Avenue and Morgan. And so I think if you look at Central Avenue today, and when you go through it, if you go and look at our whole economic development platforms, you'll see the progressions from the existing, to how it moves, to how we anticipate it would move to this. I know that, when I first heard this concept, I was like, how are you going to turn Central Avenue into something that people can walk and bike safely on? I mean, I personally speed through Central Avenue a lot. Shh. Shh. Right. I got one I need to pay now. Right.
Speed trap.
So
that's what they're talking about.
Personal experience, right? And I'm looking at it and I'm like, how do you turn that into something, that is safe? And, I'll say Matt D'Amico, who's from Design Collective, who's part of our design team, is in the room. And, they were like, there's a way to do it, and other places are doing it. You can do it. And I see Olushe, who is our deputy at DPWT, nodding her head. She's like, yes, you can do it. So this picture really, I think, tells an important story because it is, how you start to transform this area, not just being safe for bikers and pedestrians, but also creating a more friendly environment for the retail that we want to start to see along this area. Next slide. Addison Road, same thing. I'll say pay attention to the street because the, sort of first in activity for us is really about those complete streets transformations to try and change the value perspective at Addison Road. Next slide. And so this is same thing, sort of the street view at Addison Road, sort of post a complete streets transformation. You can see the Central Avenue Connector Trail running through there. It is slated to run right past the Addison Road Metro. So really important sort of what we do in this infrastructure work to start to change the value in this area. Next slide. And Capitol Heights, finally. And the great thing about this is that a lot of what we get to do at Capitol Heights is on land that is owned by us and owned by our quasi-public partners. And so we get to go in and be the catalyst that we want to be here. Next slide. I just want to give a nod. I said at the beginning that Blue Line Corridor as an anchor initiative is a model, and it's a model that we want to sort of figure out how to do what we do better and then pick it up and take it somewhere else. But we are also working in other places at the same time. The work across the county doesn't stop because we're working on Blue Line Corridor. So Purple Line Corridor is a place where we're doing a lot of work. I'll say we're really focused on two things along the Purple Line. We are focused on small business preservation along the Purple Line and also affordable housing preservation. So when I talked earlier about Purple Line being one of the fastest growing rental markets in the region, that is why we're focused on housing in the Purple Line so that we don't sort of, wake up 15 years from now and realize that only a certain income of folks can live in that area. Next slide. Greenbelt, folks are probably familiar with that because it is one of the two sites in Prince George's County, one of three overall under consideration for a new FBI headquarters. I'll say that the important thing about that also is that if at Greenbelt, that new headquarters would come with about 1 million square feet of new mixed-use development in addition to the FBI headquarters. Next slide. Suitland. For those of you who, knew what Suitland looked like, maybe 15 years ago, and if you go out there now, it is an amazing transformation that is taking place in Suitland. Really, our role out there is to try and build a new, vibrant, mixed-use neighborhood to complement the Federal Center. And the work is happening. There's a couple of different phases that have happened already. We've got a couple of different phases coming up where we'll see the first retail, the first hotel out there, and I think we're wrapping up that process. I'll say about that. So just, when we do these things, we're thinking about how we meet the broad range of goals. And so our hotel RFP was specifically geared toward minority hoteliers to meet that goal. The last building that we cut the ribbon on out there was a senior affordable building. And so these are places where wonderful things are happening, but we're also seeking to meet our economic development goals in the meantime. I think that is it. Oh, greatness grows here. They told me to say that. So, our goal for our economic development platform and our economic development work in the county is not just to be the economic engine of the state. We are already the economic engine of the state. We grew more jobs in the last 5 to 6 years than anybody else in the state of Maryland. So we are already that. We want to be the economic development engine of the region as well. And so we want to be able to compete on a level playing field with DC and Fairfax and have just as much growth centered here as we have in those places. So with that, can we take questions?
Yeah. Thank you, DC
You
and
gonna
Rogers,
start it?
very much. I am. I also want to thank some folks who are not here, but who have come to the county exec's office to do some conversations over the last couple of months that have really been helpful in making sure that when we come and talk to the broader community, we have put everything in the right context, because we want to make sure that we're communicating thoroughly. We are going to open up for questions. I'm going to do some framing questions that I think are important because they're burning and common questions, so let me just get them going for you. So why don't we just go back and really hit on, the discussions that have been had, what we've been thinking about, protecting existing communities while making way for the communities to grow, and really just flat out learning the lessons of over gentrification from the past. Can we just talk that through?
Sure. There are lots of communities around us who have already been through this. And so we would be crazy not to learn from their lessons. I think that plans around economic growth sort of often they start with the jobs, they start with trying to attract more commercial prospects. And then by the time they realize that they also need to focus on affordable housing and they need to focus on sort of what low and moderate income communities and families need, it's a much more expensive prospect to help those households and to help those communities. So it was important to us to start with everything up front. And to say to folks, you may think you don't need it right now, but we know how this goes. We've seen it happen in all of the communities around us. We know how this goes. And so let's focus on it now, and let's focus on it, at a time where, in some respects, we can put much fewer resources in and see a much bigger impact than some of our partners. So when we set the affordable housing goal, we set the goal for fresh food retail. We're setting these goals so that we make space and keep space for a range of households. And I'll just say, and I'm going to go a little bit off script, if there is a script. I come from one of those families who work hard, but they needed things. And the idea for me that, and I know many people in this room did, and so the idea that we would get to this point and not make space for our kinfolk is, to me, not the kind of work that I want to be doing. I know it's not the kind of work my team wants to be doing. And so our goal in this from the beginning is to make space.
I think the other element to clarify is space for our kids who are in the pipeline right now, right? And the kids who are going to Bowie or PGCC or graduating from Maryland.
That's right.
We need them to have opportunity for workforce housing here and build that pipeline for employment after school, or if they're involved in the trade, right? Opportunities here.
Right. No, that's exactly right. I think we've said this before, if we go along the road where the sort of buy-in to Prince George's County, is a $400,000 townhouse, and that number continues to escalate, then we are missing a whole sort of category of people to serve, including the kids that we're raising right now. When you look at our economic development platform, you'll see a goal in our, live work goal to make sure that more kids who are coming out of University of Maryland and Bowie State and the community college stay here and take jobs and live here. And that's not happening right now to the extent that it should. University of Maryland graduates are graduating and they're going somewhere else. And we have got to make space from a jobs perspective, but also from a housing perspective to make sure that those kids can stay.
So I just got a question that's about this, and it was on a note card, even though it didn't have to be, but thank you. Because note cards are for other questions, not about this. But the housing, renting to own, thinking like affordable housing and workforce housing is a goal, but what about transitioning from renters to owners? We've already done some of that work, if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, sure. I will say that, let me start out by saying this. We are building our affordable housing toolkit in Prince George's County, and we really just started to build it. It was not a huge focus for the county in the past. And so we have been focused in the start really on subsidizing more affordable rental, trying to get more just plain multifamily in the pipeline as it relates to affordable. In the past, the county did affordable and it was all senior, and we love the seniors and we're building more affordable seniors, but we also want families in the county, so to make space for them. So I will say a lot of what we've done has been focused on affordable rental, but we are starting to think about, and our DHCD director, Aspasia Zapolia, is here as well, starting to think about more tools that help us accomplish affordable home ownership. And so that is to come. But, remember, we are just starting to build. So I think we've got, 20 million going into our housing investment trust fund for the first time this year. And that is a big number to some folks. Compare that to DC, the last year put 400 million, 450. Yeah. Into affordable housing. So we are still building.
Talk about small, minority-owned businesses, opportunities, outreach.
Okay. And I just want to, you have a question over there when
Okay.
but I'll answer
And I'm
your.
going to go to her.
Okay. So our goal is really to push robust goals as it relates to small and minority businesses. I'll talk about something we did recently on the Cheverly Hospital redevelopment project. We put that solicitation out and made an award last year, but it went out not just with goals for small and minority contractor participation, but with a 40% equity requirement for that project, so that there would be ownership by minority businesses and individuals in that project. And we want to do more of that kind of thing. And we're working on some structures that we hope will help us to support that and push it along. We have a bill in the General Assembly this session, which Delegate Lewis and others are helping us to push to create, to sort of smooth the pathway to create bids in the county. Well, our intention for the Blue Line corridor is that it would be an equity-focused bid. So not just general business improvement, but specifically about growing and helping minority businesses participate in the corridor. So these are the kinds of things that we're trying to be thoughtful about and pave the way for, and to challenge ourselves to say, if we're not doing it that way, what are we doing it for?